We all know that ancient travel was dangerous, but imagine getting shipwrecked not once, but 3 times, being stoned and left for dead, and surviving a deadly snake bite, all for your beliefs. Tonight, we're following the footsteps of a man who turned his entire life upside down to travel the Roman world. In today's video, we'll talk about the trials, travels, and incredible endurance of the Apostle Paul. So let's not waste any time, and let's begin. Tonight, we begin not with a journey already underway, but with the quiet place where a future traveler first drew breath, the city of Tarsus. You are standing, for a moment, on the cobblestone streets of what was once one of the great intellectual and commercial centers of the Roman world. Allow your muscles to relax and your mind to simply absorb the air of the city that gave the world the Apostle Paul. The most immediate sound that defines this place is the Cydnus River. Its waters, fed by the melting snows of the mighty Taurus Mountains, are cool and surprisingly fast, cutting right through the middle of the city. Listen closely, and you can hear the murmur of its current as it rushes toward the sea, a constant low-frequency hum beneath the daily clamor of the port. You notice the humidity that clings to the air here, a blend of river mist and the dry inland heat. It catches in your throat, a reminder that you are at a geographic crossroads. Now, turn your attention toward the docks. Tarsus was famous for its commerce, and your family's trade, tent making, is tied directly to that life. Take a deep, slow breath and inhale the smells of the port, a dense, layered aroma of salt and fish from the ships, mixed with the sweet, dry scent of grains being unloaded from inland, and the sharp, earthy smell of tanned goat hide. This leather, used for the heavy canvas tents that sheltered both travelers and Roman soldiers, is the tactile reality of your young life. Reach out and feel the texture of a finished silicium cloth. It is not soft. It is coarse and slightly oily, woven from the black goat hair of the surrounding hills. As a boy named Saul, your hands would have known the rhythm of the loom, the repetitive, soothing creak of the wooden frame, and the dull, muscular ache in your forearm after hours of stitching. This was honest, grounding labor. Every single stitch was a meditation, a commitment to craft, teaching a discipline that would serve you well on countless future roads. Tarsus was also a free city and a great center of learning. Look around at the architecture. The buildings are not crude. They display Greek columns and Roman arches, evidence of a highly sophisticated municipal pride. You would have grown up hearing 2 languages constantly, the common Greek, koine, of the marketplace, and the scholarly Aramaic of your Jewish home. This linguistic duality instilled an intellectual flexibility, a capacity to bridge cultures. Imagine the warm, heavy silence of the schoolroom, perhaps a cool peristyle courtyard where a stoic philosopher might be lecturing nearby, while your own teacher explained the intricacies of the Torah. This blending of worlds is the core of Tarsus. You walk down a street, and on one side, you see a Roman governor's official, clean and crisp in his white toga, moving with imperial efficiency. On the other, you might see a family of Jewish merchants haggling quietly over the price of oil. The atmosphere is one of profound, yet peaceful, coexistence. There is a deep, underlying certainty to this city, a sense of order imposed by the Roman peace or Pax Romana. This quiet certainty, however, is about to be shattered by a zealous calling. You trace the lines of a Roman road as it leads out of the city gate. These roads, paved with meticulously cut stone, designed to last centuries, are the veins of the empire. They are wide, deliberate, and extend without end, beckoning the ambitious. They represent speed, purpose, and the ability to reach any corner of the known world, from Jerusalem to Rome itself. It is these straight, unchanging lines, solid beneath your feet, that will soon guide a young, passionate scholar and persecutor away from the comfort of his home. The journey he is about to undertake is one of deep conviction, a desire to protect the traditions of his fathers against a new, unsettling faith. The long, dusty walk south toward Judea beckons, a route he takes with determined, youthful zeal. He strides away from the familiar smells of the Cilicium cloth, following the unyielding geometry of the Roman infrastructure. And as the towering Taurus mountains fade into the haze behind you, the dust of the road begins to settle on your sandals, signaling the start of a fiery, life-changing mission. The path to Damascus begins now. The road to Damascus was less a scenic route and more an act of imperial engineering designed to facilitate rapid troop and administrative movement. You feel the relentless, rhythmic beat of the journey in the soles of your feet. Leaving the relative security and order of Jerusalem behind, the route soon turned north, passing through the undulating hills of Samaria, crossing the Jordan River, and then climbing onto the high, flat plains that led toward Syria. The most pervasive sensation is the heat. It is a dry, penetrating heat that seems to suck the moisture from your very bones, rising off the road in shimmering waves that distort the horizon. Your standard travel gear is simple but essential. Across your back rests a small bundle wrapped in tough linen containing spare sandals, a thin wool blanket for cold nights, and a scroll or two of scripture. Most importantly, however, is the weight you carry across your shoulder, the water skin. It is made of cured animal hide, often goat skin, crudely stitched and tarred inside to prevent leaks. You feel the slosh and shift of the lukewarm water with every step. The skin is heavy at dawn, a comforting, if burdensome, weight. By midday, the sun has baked the hide, warming the water to an unappetizing temperature, and the constant fear is the skin running dry before the next well or cistern is reached. This journey is measured not in miles, but in reliable sources of potable water. You are wearing caligae, the sturdy, open-toed leather sandals common among travelers and soldiers. They are essential for protecting the feet from the sharp edges of the basalt and limestone paving stones. After several days of walking, the leather straps have molded to the shape of your feet, but they still chafe where the grit and dust have accumulated. You find yourself constantly adjusting the thongs, the simple act of walking becoming a subtle negotiation with pain. You know the importance of keeping your feet sound. A blister or a stone bruise could delay the mission for days or even weeks. The necessity of checking your feet at every brief rest stop is paramount, pouring precious water over them to wash away the grit and soothe the strained skin. The pace is monotonous. It is a slow, deliberate trudge designed to conserve energy. You walk from first light until the heat becomes unbearable, resting through the blazing midday hours, and then continuing until sunset. The entourage you lead is small, consisting of a few trusted servants and perhaps a fellow zealot or two. There is little conversation. The journey demands focus. The only sounds are the scraping of sandals on stone, the occasional bray of a pack animal, and the deep, steady breathing of exhausted men. The mental landscape is dominated by the weight of responsibility, the firm conviction of a mission ordained by tradition and law. In many stretches, particularly when passing through the Roman province of Syria, the road is paved with dark, volcanic basalt. This material absorbs and radiates heat fiercely. You can almost feel the heat rising up through the soles of your sandals, making the ground feel perpetually hostile. Looking down at the pavement, you see that the stones are worn smooth by generations of chariots, legions, and foot traffic. Each stone is an anonymous witness to countless journeys, from emperors to escaped slaves. You, Saul, are just another man on an urgent mission, blending into the endless stream of imperial bureaucracy and commerce. You see small lizards darting across the scorching stones, their quick movements a fleeting distraction from the relentless monotony of your stride. The rhythm of the march becomes a kind of dulling trance. Left foot, right foot, adjust the water skin. Look ahead to the next horizon line. The mind, relieved of the necessity of complex thought, begins to replay arguments, sift through scripture, and steel itself for the confrontation ahead. The persecution of the followers of the Way is a matter of profound importance. It is an obligation to purity. This intense, driving conviction is the engine that pulls your body forward despite the miles of dust and sunstroke. You pass caravans laden with silks and spices heading south. The sharp, exotic scents briefly cutting through the dusty air before the road claims the smells again. As the days draw on, the terrain gradually shifts. The dry hills give way to the irrigated greenness that surrounds Damascus, an oasis famed throughout the ancient world. You catch the first glimpse of the city, a dark stain of palm trees and verdure against the vast, bleached yellow of the desert. A wave of relief, coupled with a surge of renewed intensity, washes over you. You are close. The physical exhaustion is momentarily forgotten in the anticipation of success, replaced by a nervous energy that quickens your pace. You are now just a day or two from the city gates. The path is well traveled, marked by heavy cart ruts and roadside shrines. The final stretch is a descent, a long, exposed slope that offers no shade. It is midday, and the sun is at its zenith, a perfect, blinding disk in the pale sky. The heat is almost dizzying. You raise a hand to shield your eyes, not just from the sun, but from the glare reflecting off the golden dust and the white limestone. The air is thick, dry, and heavy with anticipation. Then, everything changes. It is not a slow transformation, but an instantaneous, violent intrusion of light. It is not the white-hot glare of the sun. It is a higher, purer, utterly overwhelming light, that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. It is so intense that the world loses all definition. The dusty road, the palm trees, the familiar faces of your companions, all dissolved into a single, painful, burning brightness. You do not fall so much as you are struck down, the impact jarring your tired bones against the hard, unforgiving stones of the pavement. The light fades as quickly as it came, but the darkness that replaces it is absolute, a thick, confusing velvet. The world has ceased to exist outside the boundaries of your own head. The roar in your ears is not the heat, but the dizzying aftermath of an impossible sound, and the sudden, disorienting realization that you can no longer see the familiar. All the planning, all the mission-driven clarity is gone, replaced by total, panicked helplessness. You reach out, blindly, and feel a strong, guiding hand wrap around your arm, pulling you carefully to your feet. You must now rely entirely on the kindness of others, reversing your role from leader to the leadee as you are gently steered toward a quiet corner of the city in the long wait for recovery. You are now in Damascus, but the vibrant, bustling city you imagined is entirely inaccessible. Your world has shrunk to the confines of a single, dark room in a house on the street called Straight, in the care of a man named Judas. The transition from the blinding light of the road to this absolute darkness is less a comfort and more a profound, disorienting shock. Your eyes are useless. They register no change, no shadow, no hint of form. The velvet blackness is total, pressing against your consciousness. The next 3 days are marked by a deep, profound stillness. You are fasting, but the hunger is secondary to the ache of confusion and the overwhelming nature of the silence. Listen now to the acoustics of a blind man's room. When your sight is gone, your hearing becomes hypersensitive. You can distinguish the subtle sound of dust settling on the clay floor from the faint scraping of a beetle near the wall. You hear the deep, slow rhythm of your own heart beating, a steady, insistent drum in the quiet. Outside, the noise of Damascus is a constant, distant murmur. You hear the shouts of the water seller, the rhythmic clanging of a blacksmith's hammer miles away, and the complex babble of Aramaic, Greek, and possibly Nabatean Arabic drifting in through the small, high window. These sounds are not chaotic. They are ordered, forming a comforting, low-frequency white noise that allows the mind to retreat inward. The room itself, however, acts as a filter, allowing only the most persistent sounds to penetrate, emphasizing the quietness of your immediate space. You are lying on a simple, woven mat, covered by a thin linen sheet. The texture of the linen is cool and slightly coarse against your fevered skin, offering minor relief. Your clothes, the dusty, thick-wool tunic you wore on the road, have been stripped off and replaced with something cleaner and lighter. The lack of familiar weight feels unsettling, increasing your vulnerability. You spend hours simply running your fingers over the texture of the mat, counting the imperfections in the weave, using the subtle, tactile information to map the boundaries of your small world. The days blend into each other, measured only by the changing temperature in the room, the shift of the distant outdoor light against the wall, and the visits of those who attend to you. You do not eat. the only intake is water. The taste of stale water from a clay jar becomes the most significant sensory event of your waking hours. It is flat, slightly metallic, and offers temporary, fleeting relief to the dryness in your mouth. You drink it slowly, savoring the cool liquid as it travels down your throat, knowing that this simple act is the extent of your sustenance. The stillness of the room is immense, overwhelming. This is not the quiet of sleep, but the demanding, reflective quiet of total sensory deprivation. Your mind, prevented from engaging with the outside world through your eyes, begins to churn and wrestle with the terrifying, inexplicable events on the road. The journey north, which began with such self-assured purpose, has ended in this room of helplessness and doubt. You try to pray, to recite the familiar psalms and blessings, but the words feel hollow, echoing oddly in the silence. The conviction that drove you has been replaced by a fearful, heavy contemplation. The silence is a crucible. Hours stretch into an eternity. You realize that true helplessness is not the inability to act, but the inability to perceive. You are completely dependent on the unseen movements and intentions of others. A slight shift in the air signals someone has entered the room. A gentle hand presses a clean, damp cloth to your forehead. You try to speak, but the words are weak, catching in your throat, and you surrender to the quiet administrations of your hosts. It is deep into the third day. The silence is at its peak, the outdoor sounds muted by the late afternoon heat. You are lying down, drifting in a state between exhaustion and awareness. Suddenly, you hear a new sound, the hesitant, quiet approach of a new visitor. The footsteps are slow, measured, and deliberate. They stop beside your mat. There is a perceptible change in the air pressure, a slight draft indicating someone is kneeling beside you. Then a voice, soft, unfamiliar, but undeniably gentle, breaks the long silence. The man speaks your name, not the name of your Roman citizenship, but your given Hebrew name. You feel a hand, warm and calloused, settle lightly on your head, right where your hair meets your brow. The tactile sensation of that human touch is electric, a shock of human connection and purpose that jolts you out of your introspective darkness. It is the first tangible physical contact with the outside world that signifies an end to this oppressive quiet. As the fingers gently press, you feel a deep internal vibration, and the overwhelming stillness of the room is instantly replaced by a sudden, dizzying sense of internal movement, leading you toward the next step of a journey you never could have planned. The initial period of quiet recovery quickly gives way to a new kind of intensity. The transformation you have experienced from persecutor to preacher does not go unnoticed in Damascus. Within a short time, the authority that once protected you is now seeking your capture. The logistics of survival become immediate and paramount. You are a Roman citizen and a Jew, but now you are also a dissident, and the power of the Nabatean king Aretas, who holds sway over Damascus, is aligned against you. Your attention turns to the massive defensive structure of Damascus. The city is ancient, encircled by a formidable wall built from rough local stone, reinforced by towers and a network of strong, heavy gates. These gates, massive wooden slabs reinforced with iron, are the central points of control. They are manned by guards employed by King Aretas's local ethnarch, who are now under Ozarders to watch for your face and your companions. Every cart that enters, every traveler who leaves, is scrutinized. The primary access points are sealed off. You are trapped within a cage of stone and wood. The escape, therefore, must be improvised and deeply coordinated. You rely on the network of the very people you once sought to destroy, the quiet, resilient members of the Way. They secure a remote location high up on the wall, perhaps a window or a small opening in one of the houses built directly into the structure. You can hear the low murmur of your friends' voices as they prepare the equipment, their movements hushed and quick. The most critical component of this plan is the kofinos, or large basket. It is not a fine wickerwork picnic basket, but a heavy utilitarian vessel woven from tough, coiled reeds or rope, often used for carrying large amounts of provisions, waste, or soil. It is sturdy, but not comfortable. You inspect the ropes in the near darkness, running your hands along the thick hemp fibers to check for frayed or weak spots. Your life and the success of the escape depends entirely on the tensile strength of these ropes and the silent grip of the men holding them. The escape takes place in the deepest hours of the night, when the light of the moon is either weak or obscured by clouds, and the guards are most susceptible to the lure of sleep. You creep through the narrow, twisting alleyways. The smooth, worn paving stones cool beneath your sandals. The air is cold and carries the sharp, acrid scent of wood smoke and decaying refuse. When you reach the wall, you hear the distant, repetitive rhythm of the guards walking their patrols along the parapet above the main road. The timing is critical. You must move in the lull between their rounds. You are carefully lowered into the woven basket. It is a tight, uncomfortable fit. The stiff reeds press against your shoulders and hips, and the scent of its previous contents, perhaps old grain or simple earth, is strong and dusty. Your companions secure the top, and you hear the dry, scratchy sound of the ropes being paid out. The immediate sensation is one of terrifying height. Then, the descent begins. It is a long, slow drop down the sheer face of the stone wall. The basket swings slightly, brushing against the rough texture of the ancient masonry, sending down a quiet shower of dust and grit. You hear the soft, muffled grunt of the men above you as they strain against the weight of your body. The sound is minimal, but in the oppressive quiet of the night, every sound is magnified. Below you is only the blackness of the ditch and the scrubland outside the city. This moment contrasts sharply with the world just beyond the wall. You can hear the distant, booming authority of the Roman guards at the main gate, their voices raised in a casual, lazy banter, perhaps arguing over dice or warming themselves by a brazier. Their voices represent the power structure you have defied, the world of legal mandate and imperial force that you once served. Now, you are dangling precariously between the security of the city and the danger of the desert. relying only on the trust of those you once persecuted. When the basket finally touches the ground, the impact is quiet but jarring, sending a dull ache up your legs. You scramble out quickly, your movements stiff from the confinement. Your companions descend the ropes, and the basket is quickly retrieved. There is no time for lingering farewells. The need for stealth is absolute. You turn your back to the massive, foreboding silhouette of the city wall, which now seems like a tomb you have narrowly escaped. You feel the ground beneath your feet change, from the smoothed, artificial stone of the city to the rough, uneven earth of the open country. This is the physical break that defines the next phase of your life. The sandals scrape on the dry soil, making a much different sound than the thwap they made on the road to Damascus. With your former life behind the stone wall, you set your face toward the vast, empty expanse of Arabia, heading into the quiet, unrecorded years of study and solitude. The years that follow your escape from Damascus are not marked by famous sermons or dramatic confrontations, but by a quiet, restorative routine. You are back in your home region of Cilicia and Syria, specifically around Tarsus, the city you knew so well. This period is a necessary, almost monastic interlude, a time for deep reflection and quiet, hard labor. The energy of the zealous persecutor must be channeled into the disciplined patience of a future apostle. Your occupation remains your anchor, the tent maker. Find your seat again at the workbench. The light in your small workshop is dim and smells permanently of your trade. The air is thick with the scent of tanned hide, a mixture of pungent chemicals and dried animal fats, overlaid with the sharp, clean smell of new thread and the faint metallic scent of iron tools. This olfactory memory is synonymous with home and safety. The primary task involves shaping the tough, black goat hair canvas. This is not a task for soft hands. You press the leather firmly against the wooden bench, using a heavy, smooth stone to flatten the seams before stitching. You pick up the two main tools of the trade, the awl and the needle. The awl has a handle of polished bone or hard wood and a sharp iron point. You grip it tightly, forcing the point through the thick layers of hide with focused effort. Hear the small, sharp pop as the awl penetrates the canvas. This is the rhythmic sound of your solitude. Pop, pull, pop, pull. The rhythmic sound of the needle being drawn through the punched hole, followed by the careful, firm knotting of the heavy thread, fills the silence. The work is physical and repetitive, perfect for occupying the hands while the mind is given space to grapple with the monumental truths revealed on the road. The discipline you learned in your youth now serves a new, silent ministry. During these years, your ministry is one of slow, steady groundwork, conducted on the fringe of the established cities. You travel not as a great evangelist, but as an itinerant craftsman. You set up shop in small towns, selling your tents and your skills to local merchants and travelers. In the synagogue, you speak, but you do not linger long, allowing your testimony to sink in before you move on. There is no need for large crowds yet. This is a time for personal, quiet conviction, often sharing the message with just one or two families as you work. The scenery around you is dominated by the Taurus Mountains, high, brooding, and reassuringly permanent. You look up from your stitching and see the jagged peaks, often dusted with snow even in late spring. This permanence contrasts sharply with the frantic movement of your recent past. The mountains embody the quiet strength and stillness that you seek to cultivate within yourself. Your reputation in the nearby larger communities is still mixed. There is the lingering suspicion of the Christians who remember the persecutor Saul and the hostility of the Jewish authorities who view the converted Saul as a dangerous traitor. This isolation contributes to the solitary nature of your ministry. You learn to rely only on the message and the quiet hospitality of the poor and the marginalized. The sound of the small, simple evening prayers in these remote homes is far different from the formal, booming recitations in the Jerusalem temple. The years pass, marked by the steady output of your labor, canvas after canvas, tent after tent. Each completed piece is a tangible testament to your patience and your new commitment. You are waiting, though you do not know for what. You are strengthening your roots in this new faith, allowing the deep theological truth you encountered to integrate completely into the sharp intellectual framework of your education. One day, the quiet rhythm of the workshop is broken. It is a subtle change in the narrative that is only noticeable because of the depth of the preceding stillness. You hear a sound that is not the familiar creak of the loom or the shout of a local shepherd. It is the sound of traveling sandals on the stone path outside your door, followed by a voice you recognize, a voice of established authority and immense kindness. It is Barnabas. He has sailed from the great, thriving center of Christianity in Antioch, a city of commerce and spiritual growth. The arrival of this single man acts like a powerful magnet, pulling you immediately out of the quiet solitude of your home region. The sudden presence of this energetic colleague, this messenger from the wider world, signals that the waiting game is over. The moment Barnabas speaks your name, the scent of tanned hide and the dust of Tarsus begin to fade, replaced by the salty, exciting air of the port and the prospect of a major voyage. You set aside the awl and the heavy canvas, preparing to step onto the deck of a ship headed toward a new hub of ministry and the beginning of a life of restless travel. The vibrant, bustling city of Antioch. The city of Antioch, the first true hub of your new life, hits you with a wave of overwhelming sensory data the moment you step inside its gates. It is nothing like the dusty, academic confines of Tarsus, nor the ancient, rigid tradition of Jerusalem. This is the third largest city in the Roman Empire, a vibrant, sprawling metropolis built on the Orontes River, a place of relentless commerce and cultural fusion. The sound that defines Antioch is a cacophony, not the single, uniform drone of a smaller city, but a dense, layered roar where 1,000 conversations mingle. You are immediately struck by the sheer variety of languages. Greek is the common tongue, the koine that bridges all gaps, but you hear Latin barked by Roman officials, the soft, lilting Syrian of the local populace, the sharp, guttural Aramaic of Jewish merchants, and the quick, fluid Egyptian spoken near the port quarter. This linguistic diversity means that your message, delivered in Greek, will be heard by representatives of every nation under the sun. It is a world ready-made for universal preaching. The air itself is a complex stew of competing odors. Most prominent is the delightful, rich smell of street food. You can distinguish the savory scent of roasted lamb fat dripping onto coals, the sharp, pungent aroma of fermentation from the wine shops, and the sweet, cloying fragrance of dates and honey cakes sold by vendors on every corner. Underneath this delicious layer is the unavoidable smell of a large, ancient city, a mixture of sewage, river silt, and the heavy musk of unwashed crowds pressed close together in the markets. Your days here are spent in constant activity. Your workshop is still important, but it is now one of many small enterprises that support the Christian community. Much of your time is spent in the synagogue, where you and Barnabas speak. Listen to the sound of the synagogue scroll unrolling. It is a dry, rustling sound, followed by the quiet clearing of the reader's throat and the familiar, measured rhythm of the Hebrew or Aramaic text being chanted. This is your familiar sanctuary, the launching pad for arguments that stretch the boundaries of tradition. The community here is known for being generous and organized, and it is here that the preparations for a major missionary tour begin. The planning is meticulous, driven by the intellectual discipline you have never lost. The first task is packing supplies. The tents you made are not just for your trade, but for your shelter. You select the best, strongest silicium hide, ensuring the seams are watertight and the ropes are freshly oiled. You check and recheck your leather satchels for durability. Into them go iron cooking pots, dried beans, preserved figs, a fresh water skin, and most critically, writing supplies. Rolls of parchment or perhaps lighter, more portable papyrus, reeds for pens, and small blocks of ink. You know the importance of recording the message and sending letters back to the Mother Church. Next, you move to mapping routes. You study the Roman tabula peutingeriana, or perhaps local maritime charts. The world is crisscrossed by Roman infrastructure. The roads are known, but the sea lanes are more volatile. You trace the coastal path from Seleucia Pieria, Antioch's port, southward, calculating the distances between safe harbors. You must factor in the changing seasons, knowing the dangers of sailing after the summer months. You are planning not a short trip, but a systematic, multi-year exploration. Securing funds is Barnabas's primary strength, relying on the generosity of the Antioch church. Coins are weighed, not counted. The silver denarii and tetradrachms clinking lightly as they are passed from hand to hand, representing the sacrifice of the community. These funds are for basic sustenance, not luxury, meant to ensure you do not become a burden on the fragile new communities you intend to establish. The tension builds until the day of departure. The small party, you, Barnabas, and young John Mark, walk the 4 miles from Antioch down to its port city, Seleucia Pieria. The path is well worn, and the transition from the bustling city to the harbor is gradual. The air here tastes salty and damp, replacing the city's mingled food scents with the clean, sharp smell of the sea and pitch. The vessel you board is a common coastal sailing vessel, small and sturdy, designed for cargo and short inter-island travel, not the grand grain ships that cross the open Mediterranean. The deck is scarred, smelling of fish, brine, and old rope, You find your spot amid bales of cloth, sacks of grain, and crates of pottery. The deck is uneven, already shifting slightly under the small swell. The farewells are quiet, a simple blessing spoken by a few leaders who accompanied you to the port. Then, the ropes are cast off. The ship is pulled by oars out of the calm water of the harbor. Once clear, the captain shouts a command. The sail ropes are pulled tight, and the massive, heavy canvas catches the wind. You feel the hull groan beneath you, a deep, wooden complaint. The lurching, initial transition to the sea voyage is sudden. The shoreline of Syria begins to recede, marking the physical break from Antioch. The movement of the deck beneath your feet is a subtle, unsettling dance, carrying you toward the first leg of your vast journey, the island of Cyprus. The sea journey begins immediately, a radical shift from the solid, predictable pavement of the Roman road to the volatile, liquid instability of the Mediterranean. The small coastal vessel you board is governed by the wind, the currents, and the temper of the open sea. You learn quickly that life on a small sailing ship is defined by the constant, aggressive presence of water and salt. The most persistent sound is the canvas sail flapping high above your head. When the wind is strong and steady, the sail is taut and silent, humming a deep, low frequency that vibrates through the entire wooden hull. But when the wind shifts or lulls, the heavy canvas slackens, then snaps back with a sudden, thunderous crack that sounds like a whip, forcing a quick, instinctive flinch. This is the voice of the ship, a constant dialogue between the wooden hull and the weather. Beneath this, you hear the reassuringly monotonous rush of the water against the hull, a ceaseless, sibilant whisper. You are constantly exposed to the sensation of the hot, salty spray. The Mediterranean sun is brilliant and harsh, reflecting off the water into your eyes even when you try to shield them. As the ship cuts through the small waves, the spray lifts off the bow, a fine, cool mist that is immediately evaporated by the heat, leaving a crust of white salt on your lips, skin, and beard. Within hours, your clothes are stiff and gritty, the wool tunic chafing slightly where the salt has dried. You wipe the salt from your eyes repeatedly, enduring the sting to maintain your visibility. The cramped quarters below deck offer temporary respite from the sun, but present their own challenges. The air is heavy, stale, and thick with the combined odors of bilge water, unwashed bodies, stored provisions, and rat droppings. The space is not designed for passengers, but for cargo. You are nestled among crates and ropes, finding a small, flat space on the rough planks where you can stretch out your legs. The movement of the ship below deck is exaggerated, making reading or writing impossible. The darkness down here is comforting, a quiet place for reflection, but the smells quickly drive you back up to the fresh, if salty, air. The subtle, rhythmic roll of a coastal trading ship quickly becomes the new pulse of your life. It is not the violent, nauseating pitch of a storm, but a slow, predictable sway, a gentle list to port, followed by a correction back to starboard. This motion is relentless. You brace yourself constantly, using your legs to absorb the movement, allowing your body to learn the liquid geometry of the ocean. Even when standing still, you feel the internal sway, a minor dizziness that signals the body's constant effort to maintain balance. The world is no longer flat and stable. It is curved and moving. The journey to Cyprus is thankfully short, just a matter of days sailing across the narrow passage. As the sun sets, the water turns deep indigo, and you lie on the deck, listening to the creak of the mast and the tired breathing of the crew. You observe the captain navigating by the fixed stars, a skill far older than any Roman road, relying on the predictable patterns of the night sky. Finally, the island of Cyprus rises out of the haze. It starts as a low, dark outline, gradually resolving itself into mountains and coastal plains. You approach the eastern port of Salamis. The water becomes shallower, turning from deep blue to a clear, pale green, and the smells change again, from the open ocean brine to the distinct, earthy scent of land. The ship slows. The canvas is furled with sharp, tearing sounds, and the crew begins to maneuver with oars. You feel the forward momentum cease, replaced by the slow, grinding turn of the rudder. The sounds of the dock quickly replace the sounds of the sea, the shouting of dock workers, the sharp thump of cargo being handled, and the clanking of chains. The journey continues inland across the island, a long trek to the western city of Paphos, the seat of the Roman governor. After the days of relentless sea movement, your body still feels the rocking motion, a phantom sway in your gait. The most profound sensation of arrival is the gentle bump of the hull against the dock. It is a soft finality, a welcome resistance of wood against wood. You step onto the pier, and the weight of solid ground under your leather sandals is immense, almost shocking. You take a deep breath, inhaling the dry air and the smell of dry earth, the scent of pine and heated soil, after the long diet of salt and brine, marking the clear end of one phase of the journey and the beginning of the island traverse. The interior journey across Cyprus culminates in Paphos, the island's capital, and the official residence of the Roman governor, Proconsul Sergius Paulus. The city is a showcase of Roman administrative power, a deliberate contrast to the untidy markets and synagogues you are accustomed to. Your destination is the proconsul's residence, a complex designed to intimidate and impress. The sheer size of the building is overwhelming, a monument to the stability of the empire. As you approach, the first thing you notice is the architecture of the proconsul's residence. It is built in the grand Roman style. Straight lines, massive travertine blocks, and a colonnaded entrance designed for procession, not privacy. The air outside is clean, devoid of the usual city dust, suggesting constant maintenance. Entering the building, you immediately feel the change in temperature. The interior is cool and silent, a stark relief from the heat of the Cypriot sun. Your feet touch the smooth marble floors. The stones are cool and highly polished, reflecting the ambient light. Your footsteps, muffled by your leather sandals, sound oddly loud in the quiet, formal halls. The cleanliness is absolute, reflecting the Roman obsession with order and hygiene. The entire environment speaks of quiet efficiency. The Roman guards, or speculatores, move with disciplined silence. Their uniforms are clean, their metallic armor gleaming faintly in the diffused light. They stand at attention, their postures rigid and their expressions unreadable. There is no loud, casual banter here. Authority is maintained through stillness and visual control. The only sound is the subtle shift of their weight, or the soft, barely perceptible squeak of leather on leather. You are ushered into an antechamber to await the proconsul. This waiting period is tense. The atmosphere is thick with a legalistic, formal quality. You are no longer debating scripture in a noisy synagogue. You are in the presence of ultimate civil power. Every gesture, every spoken word is freighted with political and legal significance. The confrontation that takes place is not just between you and the governor, but between two competing voices, yours and that of the sorcerer, Bar Jesus, also known as Elymas. He is a man who relies on charisma, spectacle, and persuasive language. You observe him closely. His movements are theatrical, his clothing perhaps slightly too vibrant, and his voice carries a professional resonance designed to fill large spaces and command attention. When you speak, you consciously keep your tone measured, rejecting the performance of the sorcerer. You present the message as a legal truth, relying on the rhetorical training of Tarsus and the theological clarity forged in the quiet years of Cilicia. The climax of the encounter is sudden and dramatic. The sorcerer's resistance forces your hand. You feel the inner certainty, the same inexplicable force that struck you down on the Damascus road, rise within you. You pronounce judgment upon Elymas, and the immediate tactile sensation of blindness falling upon him is palpable. He stumbles, his carefully constructed composure instantly dissolving into confusion. You hear his quick, panicked breaths, followed by the shuffling of his feet as he desperately seeks a guide's hand. The polished marble floor, which moments ago symbolized Roman order, now becomes a perilous trap for the newly sightless man. Sergius Paulus, the proconsul, watches this spectacle with the quiet, analytical detachment of a seasoned Roman administrator. His reaction is not fear, but profound awe and curiosity, the recognition of a power that supersedes the lex of Rome. The meeting concludes with the proconsul's quiet affirmation of belief. The formal atmosphere has not been disturbed by chaos, but transformed by conviction. The Cyprus ministry is finished, marked by the contrast between the governor's faith and the sorcerer's blindness. It is time to move on. But the next leg of the journey is not a simple coastal hop. You must now cross to the mainland of Asia Minor. The anxiety of the coming voyage is immediately apparent. You move from the quiet, cool marble halls of Roman authority back to the hustle of the Paphos docks, where you must book passage again. The captain you find speaks with a rough, anxious tone, warning you about the specific dangers of crossing the waters off the coast of Pamphylia. This particular stretch of sea is known for unpredictable squalls and pirates who prey on the coastal trade routes. The sense of stability found in the governor's palace evaporates instantly. The world outside the walls is wild and unforgiving. As you board the ship, the deck creaks again, and you feel the familiar, unsettling sway of the sea, now amplified by a sense of foreboding for the treacherous crossing ahead. The sea crossing from Paphos to the Pamphylian coast is swift but brutal, marked by the anxieties of the captain and the uncomfortable movement of the small ship. The voyage culminates at the port of Perga. Stepping onto the mainland, however, offers no relief. The coastal air is thick, humid, and heavy, but your destination lies inland, requiring a long and demanding treacherous ascent into the interior of Asia Minor. The moment you leave the immediate coastal plain, the journey becomes an exercise in sheer physical endurance. This is no gentle Roman road. The path quickly narrows and winds into the steep Taurus mountain range. The climb is unrelenting. The air, which was humid and stifling at sea level, begins to thin, becoming dry, hot, and dusty. This change in climate is immediate and punishing. You find your lungs working harder, and your skin, already sun-beaten from the sea voyage, cracks slightly in the dry mountain air. The ground under your sandals is made of loose, jagged stones and hard, red clay. The sound of your feet is a constant, grinding scrape as you push up the incline. You rely heavily on a sturdy, wooden staff, pressing its weight into the earth with every upward step. The sheer, physical toll of climbing altitude on foot is immense. Your muscles ache in ways the flat roads of Syria never demanded. The heat is less intense than the desert sun, but more pervasive, trapping the heat in the narrow valleys. The most serious psychological factor is the potential for bandits. This region is famously rugged and far from the easy reach of Roman law enforcement. You are constantly scanning the jagged, brush-covered slopes above you. The silence of the mountain passes is unnerving. Any sudden noise, the dislodging of a stone, the cry of a hawk, brings an immediate rush of adrenaline. Barnabas and you walk close together, carrying your possessions lightly, relying on quick movement and vigilance rather than wealth or weaponry for protection. You know that to fall ill or to be robbed here would mean certain death. It is during this difficult inland trek that John Mark makes his decision. The physical hardship, the lurking threat of danger, and the loneliness of the mountain passes prove too much. The sight of him turning back, heading down the steep path toward the safety and ease of the coast, is a heavy moment, but the climb demands immediate attention. You press on, the path ahead growing ever steeper. As you ascend, the scenery becomes more remote and beautiful. You look down on clouds, and the coastal plain stretches out like a faded map below you. The stone walls of the canyons are immense, echoing the scale of the commitment you have undertaken. The silence of the high mountains is different from the silence of your room in Damascus. This is a majestic geological quiet, punctuated only by the wind whistling through the high passes. After days of relentless climbing, the path begins its gradual transition from the rugged foothills. The dense forests and sharp cliffs slowly give way to more rounded lower hills. The air remains dry, but the steep angles lessen and the terrain opens up. This is the region of Pisidia, known for its open, rolling plains. You begin to see signs of agriculture again. Patches of wheat-growing fields appear, their golden color a welcome sight after the gray and brown of the rock. The sight of cultivated land signals the proximity of civilization and safety. The ground beneath your feet becomes flatter, made of softer earth that gives slightly under your sandals, a blessed relief to your aching knees and ankles. You smell the dry, slightly yeasty aroma of the ripened grain. The The small villages you pass are built from sun-dried brick, contrasting sharply with the stone fortresses of the coast. The people here are cautious but hospitable, recognizing the exhaustion etched on your face. The final push is a walk across this plateau. It is a long, sun-drenched traverse, the road smoother now, winding between the fields. This plateau is your final approach, leading to the next major destination, the city of Antioch of Pisidia. The relief in your stride is palpable. The worst of the physical journey is over, and your focus shifts from survival to preaching, preparing your argument for the synagogue in this large, strategically important inland city. The city of Antioch of Pisidia is a revelation, a contrast to the rugged bandit country you have just traversed. It is a major inland Roman colony, deliberately built as a miniature version of Rome itself, designed to project imperial power and order deep into the Anatolian interior. The air here is drier and cleaner than the coast, carrying the distinct, ordered scent of a disciplined Roman settlement. Stone dust, hot asphalt, and the sharp, slightly metallic smell of official bureaucracy. The social and economic atmosphere is palpably Roman. This is a place where civic pride is a dominant emotion. The citizens, many of them veterans or their descendants, walk with a straight-backed confidence. You see the pride displayed in the quality of the public works, the aqueducts that bring clean mountain water into the city, the imposing temple dedicated to Augustus, and the beautifully paved central square. The feeling of being in a successful colony is reassuring, almost intoxicating, promising the stability necessary for a message to take root. The sounds of the Roman market are a busy, regulated roar. Unlike the chaotic haggling of Eastern bazaars, the commerce here is conducted with a sense of Roman efficiency. You hear the crisp, rhythmic clatter of the public scales, the sharp ringing of the smith's hammer, and the loud, clear shouts of auctioneers selling imported goods. Latin is spoken widely, particularly in the Forum, but the everyday tongue remains Greek, the lingua franca of trade. You observe the market stalls laden with local produce, hard mountain cheeses, deep red wines, and thick, woven Anatolian rugs, all signs of a prosperous hinterland. Your focus, however, is the synagogue. As a diaspora center, the specific layout of a diaspora synagogue is slightly different from the ones in Judea, more open and integrating Greek architectural styles. The building is simple, perhaps a rented hall or a structure built of humble stone. It is oriented not toward Jerusalem, but toward the practical needs of the local Jewish community and the God-fearers, Gentiles who are drawn to Jewish monotheism. The room is quiet, the air cool and faintly scented with old parchment and lamp oil. The Sabbath day begins, marked by the ritual of purification. You join the gathered men, moving through the necessary rites with the automatic precision of lifelong training. The ritual washing of hands before the reading of the law is a sensory grounding moment. The water is cool and clear, poured from a metal or clay pitcher. You feel the smoothness of the stone basin, the deliberate, controlled motion of your fingers as they are cleansed. This familiar act provides a moment of stillness before the public event, grounding you in tradition even as you prepare to upend its expectations. When you rise to speak, you feel the weight of the entire room. You know that within the audience, side by side, sit the rigid, conservative Jewish leaders and the open, intellectually curious Gentile inquirers. Your message, starting from the familiar cadence of Scripture, gradually moves to the startling claim of the Messiah's fulfillment. The effect is immediate and profound. The sense of civic pride that defines this colony is suddenly turned inward, questioning its own foundations. The Greek-speaking majority, who already respect the ethical clarity of Judaism but shrink from circumcision, find your teaching of grace and inclusion magnetic. You spend the week following the Sabbath teaching outside the synagogue, where the crowds grow so large they spill out into the open streets. You hear the deep hum of conversation, the whispers of awe, and the excited rush of new converts who embrace the message freely. But success breeds immediate, intense opposition. The Jewish leaders, witnessing their community and their Gentile influence drain away, react with escalating fury. Their response is characterized by harsh verbal abuse and disruptive behavior. The smooth, rational order of the Roman colony begins to fracture under the strain of a new, destabilizing idea. You are accused of social disruption, of threatening the community's careful equilibrium. The tension culminates in a fierce, public confrontation. Your words, your final, firm declaration that you will now turn your focus fully to the Gentiles, seal the split. The air crackles with hostility. Your opponents are no longer merely arguing. They are mobilizing the local city officials, the elite citizens whose favor you had initially hoped to secure. You sense the immediate shift in the wind, the heavy, dark shadow of official displeasure settling over the city. The danger is no longer just theological, it is physical and legal. The only option is immediate flight. The quiet, necessary action is coordinated by your new converts. There is no time for long goodbyes. Under the cover of dusk, you and Barnabas are led swiftly through the back alleys, away from the main thoroughfare. The final moment of your ministry in Pisidian Antioch is a tense, breathless sprint toward the boundary. You feel the dry earth and sharp edges of the untended path under your feet, a sharp contrast to the polished Roman paving stones of the city center. With a final, shared look of determination, you slip through a minor opening, a breach in the city's defensive perimeter, and find yourselves on the road again, making a quick, quiet departure out of the city gates and turning your faces toward the next horizon, the ancient city of Iconium. The road from Pisidian Antioch is less of a punishing climb than the last, but it is still a hard, long walk to Iconium. Iconium is fundamentally different from the organized Roman colonia you just fled. It is a genuine crossroads of civilizations, an ancient Phrygian city that has been thoroughly Hellenized by Greek culture and administration, now functioning as a key transit point for goods moving east and west. The atmosphere is a study in cultural blend. You find yourself navigating streets where the old and the new meet. The city grid, though nominally Greek, is crooked and organic, following the paths of ancient irrigation canals and cattle tracks. The geometry of the city grid is therefore pleasingly chaotic, forcing a meandering walk that keeps you from ever seeing too far ahead. The buildings are an eclectic mix. Simple Phrygian stone structures standing alongside Greek marble facades. The sounds reflect this fusion. You hear the dominant, flowing melody of the Greek language, but constantly overlaid with the strange, slightly harsh inflections of Phrygian, the ancient native language. The local populace still converses in this deep-rooted tongue, a constant reminder that you are not in a purely Roman or Greek sphere, but in a territory where traditions run deep beneath the surface of empire. The city is a center for handicrafts and textiles, and the air carries the dry, musky scent of wool and raw dye. The background noise of the city is dominated by the persistent sound of weaving looms. It is a rhythmic, hypnotic clack, clack, clack that echoes from the inner courtyards and workshops, the engine of the city's economy. This mechanical beat is accompanied by the boisterous energy of merchant haggling. The sound is sharp, full of exaggerated protestations and sudden bursts of laughter, a theatrical ritual conducted over prices and goods. Iconium is also famous for its artisans. You examine the unique pottery styles in the market. Unlike the smooth, black-glazed wares of Athens or the red earthenware of Italy, the pottery here is robust, decorated with distinctive local geometric and animal motifs, reflecting the ancient earthy traditions of the region. You run your fingers over the coarse, unrefined clay, feeling the texture of a culture that has endured for millennia. Your ministry begins with the same pattern, the synagogue. For a time, your message is a profound success, uniting both Jews and Gentiles in a common conviction. You feel the warm support of the new believers, the quiet, nodding certainty in their eyes. The community here is strong, capable of withstanding the inevitable initial resistance. But the opposition is more deeply entrenched here. The dissenting Jewish leaders do not merely use insults. They actively and systematically poison the minds of the Gentiles, spreading rumors and lies about you and Barnabas. The air in the synagogue, once filled with spiritual fervor, becomes charged with malice and suspicion. The conflict moves out of the realm of rhetoric and into the city streets. You notice the change not in a decree, but in the subtle actions of the crowd. When you pass through the market, the cheerful noise of the merchant haggling stops abruptly, replaced by a cold, watchful silence. You see men whispering in corners, their eyes following your movements. The sense of building danger is palpable, a creeping anxiety that makes the back of your neck prickle. The situation escalates to a crisis point. One evening, as you are gathered with a small group of believers in a house, you hear a sound that signals immediate and extreme peril. The dull, heavy clink of stones being gathered outside a building. It is the unmistakable sound of a crowd preparing for violence, the sound of an impending riot and stoning, a fate you narrowly escaped in Jerusalem, and one that Stephen faced squarely. The stones are being dragged, scraped, and piled up on the rough street pavement. The decision is instantaneous. Your friends urge you to flee, pushing you toward the back of the house. There is no time for planning, only immediate action. You move with a hurried, stealthy departure under the cloak of night. The moonlight is minimal, and the shadows are deep and confusing. You slip through a narrow side door into an alleyway. the rough stone scraping against your tunic. The only sound is the quick, shallow breathing of your companions and the pounding of your own heart. You hear the shouts of the angry mob as they realize you have escaped, their voices echoing in the tight, dark streets. You break into a quiet run, putting distance between yourselves and the sound of the stones. The feeling of the cold, hard earth beneath your feet signals your desperate flight to the next, less civilized stop. The Lycaonian cities of Lystra and Derbe. The escape from Iconium leads you and Barnabas south into the region known as Lycaonia, toward the city of Lystra. The transition from the complex commercial crossroads to the simple, rustic life of the Lycaonian countryside is immediate and stark. Here, the sophistication of Greek letters and Roman bureaucracy melts away, replaced by the ancient, unpolished texture of rural existence. The roads themselves tell the story. They are not paved with the worn, smooth basalt of the Roman arteries, nor the rough, cobbled stone of Iconium. These are rough, unpaved paths, dirt tracks carved out by generations of ox carts and livestock. Your sandals sink slightly into the dust in dry weather, or slide precariously in the mud after a rain. The walking is challenging, demanding constant attention to where you place your weight. You hear the soft, whispering shush of dust rising with every step, a low sound that contrasts sharply with the sharp scrapes of the mountain climb. The environment is dominated by the sensory realities of farming. The air is thick with the smell of cow dung and hay, a rich, earthy aroma of animal husbandry and harvest. The heat of the sun releases the deep, fermented scent of the manure from the fields, mixing with the sweeter, dry smell of stored grain and sun-cured grass. It is a smell of labor, sustenance, and primal connection to the soil. The people here speak Lycaonian, a native tongue so distinct it feels completely foreign. A language that forces you to rely entirely on your knowledge of Greek to communicate. The locals are farmers, shepherds, and simple artisans. Their clothing reflects their environment. Simple, wool tunics, coarsely woven and undyed, often heavy and practical for working the fields. You observe the way their skin is permanently tanned and weathered, their hands thick and calloused from a life of manual work. They are isolated, living closely connected to the land and the ancient cycles of nature, a fact that deeply shapes their spiritual understanding. Your ministry in Lystra begins, as ever, with the message of grace. You are speaking in the open air, perhaps in the town square. You notice a man, crippled from birth, sitting and listening intently, his eyes fixed upon you. When you command him to stand, the sudden physical healing is so dramatic and undeniable that it completely overloads the local population's frame of reference. This is where the profound misunderstanding of the local mythology takes root. The Lycaonians are instantly convinced that you and Barnabas are not merely preachers or prophets, but gods who have descended to earth in human form, a belief rooted in their deeply held traditional stories of Zeus and Hermes visiting their region. The crowd erupts into worship. They bring out the priest of Zeus, and oxen wreathed in flowers. The noise of the procession is overwhelming. The clanging of the priest's bronze ornaments, the confused bellowing of the heavy oxen, and the excited multilingual roar of the crowd. The language they shout is Lycaonian, and it takes time for you and Barnabas to grasp the terrifying scale of their error. They are calling Barnabas Zeus and you Hermes, the messenger god, in acknowledgement of your persuasive speech. The horror of this moment is extreme. You tear your clothes in a gesture of absolute, frantic denial, plunging into the center of the throng to stop the ritual sacrifice. This is a battle against primal religion, against a tradition that views you not as a servant of the one true God, but as a participant in a polytheistic pantheon. The local Jewish agitators who have followed you from Iconium and Antioch quickly capitalize on this confusion. The mood of the crowd turns with a terrifying speed. The very people who moments ago were preparing to offer sacrifice now turn on you with furious religious zeal. The transition is violent and shocking. The sound of the mob changes instantly from reverence to rage. You feel the sudden, heavy impact of a stone striking your head, followed by a dizzying rush of pain. You collapse instantly. The shocking transition from being worshipped as gods to being stoned is brutal and disorienting. You feel the rough, unpaved path under your cheek, the taste of dry dust and blood in your mouth. You are dragged out of the city gates, the friction of your body against the rough road tearing at your skin and tunic. Then, the world fades to a dull, throbbing pain and darkness. You lie there, abandoned outside the city, presumed dead, until the believers from Lystra gather around your still body, signaling the harsh, immediate reality of your itinerant life. The immediate aftermath of the stoning is defined by a deep, numbing ache. When you finally stir, surrounded by the anxious, fearful faces of the Lystran believers, the world is a kaleidoscope of sharp, localized pain. This chapter is not about grand miracles, but about the slow, agonizing process of Paul's physical recovery. You are moved with careful hands back into the city, secreted away in a private home. The dominant sensation is a dull ache of the body, centered in your head and radiating throughout your chest and limbs. Every movement is a careful, calculated negotiation with pain. To sit up requires a massive, shuddering effort. To breathe deeply is to invite a sharp, internal reminder of the blows you suffered. You lie on a simple pallet, the rough wool blanket feeling scratchy and abrasive against your bruised skin. The air is warm, the sounds of the rustic life outside, the braying of a donkey, the lowing of cattle, a constant, distant reminder of the world you must soon re-enter. The immediate objective is survival, followed by forward movement. You know you cannot linger in Lystra. The next day, you force yourself to move. The necessity of slow, careful movement dictates your pace. Every step you take is a deliberate act of will. You rely heavily on a new staff, leaning heavily on it to bear your weight. The walking is a measured rhythm. Plant the staff, shift weight, move one foot, pause, move the next. The constant soft groans and sharp intakes of breath are the only measure of your difficulty. The small party sets out for Derbe, the final city on this eastward trek. The journey is short, but grueling. Your companions, Barnabas, and the handful of local believers who accompany you, move with a quiet, supportive solemnity. This is the quiet camaraderie of the traveling companions. They do not offer platitudes or unnecessary conversation. Instead, they offer the practical support of shared burdens. A gentle hand steadying your elbow on a rough patch of road, a fresh water skin offered without a request, a silent understanding of the danger and commitment involved. This shared physical suffering solidifies the spiritual bond between you all. From Derby, where the message is received peacefully, you make the crucial decision. You must turn back, retracing the long, painful road of persecution to strengthen the communities you established. This return journey is agonizing, a reverse pilgrimage of suffering. You move slowly through Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, confronting the very places where you were nearly killed. The pain dulls, but never vanishes. It becomes a constant, low thrum beneath the surface of your awareness. A physical tax you must pay for every sermon delivered, every leader appointed, every farewell spoken. You teach the new believers not about an easy life, but about the harsh necessity of perseverance. Quoting the reality of your own bruised body, we must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God. The long walk culminates back at the coast of Pamphylia. The smell of the sea is once again a welcome relief, washing away the dust and the scent of the high mountains. You secure passage back to Seleucia Pieria, the port of Antioch. The final sea journey back to Antioch in Syria is calm and restorative. You stand on the deck, no longer fearing the spray or the pitch, but welcoming the cool, endless expanse of the water. The rhythmic sway of the ship is no longer threatening, but soothing, a gentle rocking that eases the stiffness in your limbs. The days are spent in quiet contemplation, reviewing the incredible journey, the conversions, the healings, the two cities where you were nearly stoned to death. As the vessel enters the harbor at Seleucia, the familiar scents return, the salt and pitch giving way to the rich, savory smell of the city. The relief of being home is immense, a final, deep sigh of release. You gather the church and recount the entire story, detailing how God had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. But even as you rest and heal, you know the work is not finished. The seeds of debate were sown by your inclusion of the uncircumcised Gentiles. This successful tour, this triumph of faith across Asia Minor, has created a theological crisis that must be addressed, setting the stage for the narrative pause and the great theological debate that awaits in Jerusalem. The journey from Antioch in Syria to Jerusalem is not a triumphal return, but a pilgrimage of profound anxiety. You travel not just to report your ministry, but to defend it against the bedrock of your own faith. The whole process feels like submitting your life's work to a final, binding judgment. The shift in atmosphere upon arriving in Jerusalem is immediate and absolute. The boisterous, multicultural energy of Antioch is replaced by a deep, palpable sense of ancient ritual and legal tradition. The meeting place itself embodies this seriousness. The elders and apostles gather in a large room, likely a substantial structure built of Jerusalem stone, its walls thick and its windows narrow against the harsh sun. The specific, ancient architecture of the meeting place is designed for gravity and solemnity. The light filtering through the high openings illuminates dust motes dancing in the still air, throwing the faces of the assembled leaders into sharp relief. The room smells of old cedar, polished stone, and the distinctive scent of fine, old books. The initial proceedings are dominated by the opposition, the faction known as the Circumcision Party. Their arguments are sharp, legalistic, and entirely familiar to you, echoing the rigorous discipline of your own Pharisaic past. You listen to the sharp, dry sound of their pronouncements, each point footnoted in Scripture, each argument a defense of the purity of the Abrahamic covenant. Their voices hold the weight of ancient legal tradition, the accumulation of centuries of commitment to the law. The air is tense, strained by the clash between the radical newness of grace and the eternal insistence of inherited duty. When it is your turn to speak, you and Barnabas speak as witnesses, not debaters. You tell the story of the past 2 years, moving from the shores of Cyprus to the highlands of Pisidia. You describe the power you witnessed, the hand of God moving among people who knew nothing of the law, who were untouched by ritual purification or the sign of circumcision. You describe the sound of their earnest new faith, the profound, simple joy of their conversions. The turning point comes with Peter's testimony, an unexpected, booming validation of your work. But the final decision rests with James, the brother of the Lord, the acknowledged head of the Jerusalem church. James speaks last, his voice quiet, measured, and emanating an absolute, undeniable authority. He is not relying on rhetoric, but on the accumulated moral weight of his life and his deep command of the Scriptures. You watch him carefully as he formulates the decision. He refers to the prophets, weaving their ancient words into a pattern that accommodates the present. You note the physical tools of this process, the scratchy sound of the reed pen against the prepared parchment, the dark, slow-spreading blot of the ink as the official decree is transcribed. It is a moment where prophecy becomes policy, where the theological debate crystallizes into a practical set of rules. The feeling of the heavy parchment later pressed into your hands is the physical embodiment of the council's resolution. It is a compromise, a necessary accommodation to the purity concerns of the Jewish community, but it is ultimately a ratification of your Gentile mission. The council concludes, the tension dissipates, and the intense, formalized rhythm of Jerusalem yields back to the practical realities of the road. You spend a brief period in Antioch, preparing for the inevitable second journey. The decision is made to revisit the cities of the first tour, to check on the young, fragile communities you left behind. However, the planning exposes a fundamental rift between you and Barnabas concerning John Mark's earlier desertion. The disagreement is intense, sharp, and deeply painful, ending in the inevitable necessity of separation. The friendship that began in the shared labor of Antioch is broken over a matter of trust and loyalty. The decision to part company with Barnabas is a somber, silent farewell. He takes John Mark and sails to Cyprus. You choose the overland route, taking Silas as your new companion. Your path leads you east, toward your own homeland of Cilicia. The very beginning of this new journey is marked by a deep sense of loss and solitary resolve. The initial stages of the walk are quiet, dominated by the solo walk up the steep road toward the Cilician gates. You feel the hard earth beneath your feet, the sun on your back, and the immense new weight of the journey resting on your shoulders alone. You are trading the comforting, familiar presence of a longtime friend for the silence of a determined, necessary mission. The goal is clear: to strengthen the churches, but the emotional cost of the parting is heavy, a private wound carried forward into the next great mountain range. The initial days of the journey are defined by the physical challenge of climbing out of the plain and into the Taurus Mountains, heading toward the most crucial geological feature of the Anatolian continent, the Cilician Gates, or Porta Cilicia. This is more than a mountain pass. It is the single, immense bottleneck that controls all land traffic between coastal Cilicia and the vast high plateau of central Anatolia. As you approach the pass, the terrain becomes dramatically compressed. The path, though a Roman road, is narrow, winding, and unforgiving. The sheer, daunting cliffs rise hundreds of feet on either side of the gorge. They are dark, scarred by ancient water erosion and geological upheaval, blotting out the direct sunlight and creating a powerful, shadowed tunnel effect. The sense of being enclosed by the earth is absolute. The air quality changes immediately. The cold, sharp wind funnels down the gorge, hitting you with a surprising force, cutting through your woolen tunic and raising goose flesh on your arms. The wind carries the scent of pine resin and wet stone, replacing the dusty odor of the plains. You hear the ceaseless, high-pitched whine of the wind as it scrapes across the rock faces, a sound that is both magnificent and vaguely threatening. The echo of their footsteps in the narrow gorge is unnervingly loud. The stone walls reflect and amplify every sound. The scrape of your sandal on the pavement, the tap of your staff, the low, occasional exchange of words with Silas. The silence between these sounds is profound and heavy. You are constantly aware of the possibility of ambush, a threat that is amplified in this constrained space where escape is impossible. You watch Silas as he scans the high rock ledges, a shared, silent vigilance born of experience. The military presence here is palpable, a constant reminder of the crucial military and trade importance of this single bottleneck. You pass Roman garrison posts carved directly into the rock face, their presence ensuring the safety of the trade route. You see the glint of helmets and the flash of spears, and you feel the quiet, watching tension of the soldiers who guard this vital strategic point. The road is choked with traffic, a slow, single-file procession of all the commerce that sustains the Roman East. You pass huge groaning ox carts laden with grain, mules carrying valuable spices and silks from the distant Orient, and long lines of soldiers marching with relentless discipline. The noise of this movement, the cracking of whips, the creak of wooden wheels, the shouts of the drivers, is contained and amplified by the stone walls, creating a relentless, overwhelming drumbeat of human activity. You reflect on the political significance of this place. To control the Cilician Gates is to control the economy and defense of Asia Minor. Every step you take through this gorge is a step deeper into the heart of the Roman sphere, a world built on trade, power, and logistics, a world that your message must penetrate and transform. the long ascent finally reaches its peak. You pass through the narrowest, most dramatic section, the true gate, a moment of profound psychological passage. And then, abruptly, the world opens up. The passage through the gates is like stepping out of a dark, cold cave into blinding daylight. The sudden, flat expanse of the Anatolian plateau stretches out before you, vast and almost overwhelming in its horizontality. The air is immediately warmer, less compressed, carrying the dry, dusty scent of the high plains. The silence is different too, not the contained, amplified silence of the gorge, but the enormous, empty quiet of open land, broken only by the distant sounds of wind and small herds. The road ahead is straight, disappearing into the heat haze. The geographical transition is complete. You have left the maritime, coastal world of the Mediterranean behind and entered the high continental interior. The journey now lies across the vast, slightly rolling fields of the plateau, the geographical transition to the cities of Galatia and beyond. Your goal is to circle back to Derbe, Lystra, and Iconium, strengthening the communities you founded. The memory of the claustrophobic gorge gives way to the open sense of destiny and the anticipation of reunion with the believers waiting in the cities ahead. The second missionary journey takes you through the familiar cities of Galatia, where you revisit the churches you founded, and then presses relentlessly westward. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, marked by the steady rhythm of walking, teaching, and managing the constant low-grade opposition. The journey becomes a slow, methodical march across the Roman provinces, a systematic process of consolidation and expansion. The momentum finally carries you to the port city of Troas, situated on the edge of the Aegean Sea. This is where the Asian landmass effectively ends. The contrast between the long, dusty roads of the interior and the sight of the open water is stark and immediate. The air is heavy with moisture, carrying the fresh, clean scent of the sea, mingled with the utilitarian smells of the harbor. The sounds of the harbor are a distinct symphony of commerce and travel. Most prominent is the low, repetitive creak of ropes as they strain against the massive wooden masts of the trading vessels tied to the dock. This is accompanied by the rhythmic splash of small waves against the stone quay and the shouted commands of the ship crews, their voices distorted by the salty air. Underneath this, the atmosphere is defined by the scent of dried fish. It is an overwhelming, slightly acrid smell that clings to the wooden pilings, the nets, and the canvas sails. You breathe it in, recognizing it as the scent of the sea trade, the lifeblood of this city. Troas is a transit point, a place of constant arrival and departure. But for you, the journey has stalled. Every attempt to move north into Bithynia or south into Asia Minor has been blocked by an inner restraint, a sense of a door being firmly, inexplicably closed. The long journey and the enforced waiting create a state of profound fatigue. You feel an overwhelming weariness that settles not just in the muscles of your legs, but deep within your bones and mind. The days of walking, the nights of intense discussion, the worry over the struggling churches. It has all accumulated into a pervasive mental and physical exhaustion. You find yourself gazing eastward at the distant smudge of the European continent, wondering what lies ahead, but unable to muster the strength to choose the next path. It is in this state of exhaustion, during the deep, quiet hours of the night, that the silence of the room is broken. You are not sleeping deeply, but resting in a hazy, half-aware state when the vision occurs. It is not a blinding, terrifying revelation like Damascus, but a clear, simple appearance that resonates with absolute authority. You see a man, clear and sharp in your mind's eye, standing on the opposite shore. He is dressed in the simple style of a Macedonian, a European, and he speaks with a quiet, urgent plea. Come over to Macedonia and help us. The simplicity of the request, placed against your state of deep weariness, makes it a momentous, life-altering call. It cuts through the fog of exhaustion and the confusion of blocked paths. The sheer physical distance that separates you from this man, the width of the Aegean Sea, is suddenly negated by the spiritual clarity of his voice. The message is a direct, unavoidable command to leave the entire continent of Asia behind and step onto European soil, carrying the message into a completely new cultural, legal, and spiritual sphere. The decision is instantaneous and accepted by your companions, Silas and the newly joined Timothy and Luke. The previous uncertainty vanishes, replaced by a fierce, driving purpose. The time for waiting and debating is over. The quick decision to find passage is carried out at first light. You return to the docks, the urgency replacing the fatigue. You find a captain preparing to sail to Samothrace, and then onward to Neapolis, the port of Philippi. There is no time for leisurely preparation. You and your companions scramble aboard, finding a spot amongst the cargo and the other passengers. The immediate immersion into the sea voyage is absolute. The ropes are cast off, the canvas catches the wind, and the sound of the hull cutting through the water immediately replaces the sounds of the harbor. The city of Troas recedes quickly, and within hours, the Asian shore is a low, distant line on the horizon. The crossing is fast, driven by a favorable wind, a testament to the fact that you are finally moving in alignment with a clear, divine purpose. You stand at the railing, watching the prow of the ship cut the waves, and you feel the true weight of the journey ahead. You are the first to bring this gospel from Asia to Europe, crossing a cultural boundary far deeper than the physical water beneath you. The arrival in Neapolis is brief, the port merely a necessary transit point before the immediate, determined march inland to Philippi, the Roman colony. Philippi is a city designed, like Antioch and Pisidia, to project imperial control, a place where Roman law and civic pride are dominant. The atmosphere is legalistic, organized, and focused on status. Your message of a crucified king immediately creates friction with this ordered, powerful world. The confrontation begins in the river, where you speak to a small group of women, and then escalates quickly over the matter of the possessed girl. The reaction of the city authorities is swift, brutal, and public. You and Silas are dragged into the forum, stripped and severely beaten by the lictors, the rods leaving raw, burning stripes across your backs. The pain is intense, a sharp, white-hot agony that immediately takes the breath out of your lungs. You are thrown into the local Roman prison. The door slams shut behind you with a heavy, final thud that seals you into a world of stone and darkness. The immersive exploration of the Roman prison begins in the inner, most secure cell, known as the interior carcer. The first, most pervasive sensation is the damp, cold temperature of the stone walls. The stone is perpetually wet, clinging to your skin and clothes. drawing the heat from your body and creating a penetrating, miserable chill. The floor is made of cold, rough-cut rock, uneven and slick with moisture. The air is stagnant and heavy, lacking any fresh movement. The taste of stale air is metallic and earthy, thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, human waste, and the damp odor of decay. It is a suffocating atmosphere that presses in on your chest, making breathing a shallow, unpleasant exercise. Your wounds, untreated, begin to throb in the cold and the dark. The jailer, following his orders, has bound you in the stocks. The wood is rough and abrasive against your swollen ankles. The clanking sound of the heavy chains is the defining noise of the chamber. Every slight movement, a shift of weight, a repositioning of your head, produces a grinding, metallic rasp of iron against iron. It is a sound that reinforces the sense of complete, inescapable confinement. You are immobilized, in pain, and utterly at the mercy of the Roman system. Yet, as the night deepens, something miraculous and strange begins to occur. Despite the pain and the utter misery of the confinement, a sense of peace settles over you and Silas. Around midnight, the sound changes. Instead of the sounds of groaning or the restless shuffling of the other prisoners, a new noise begins to fill the chamber. The surprising, steady rhythm of the hymn singing. Your voice and Silas's, though rough and strained from the beatings, rise in quiet, deliberate praise. You sing the ancient psalms, the familiar melodies cutting through the darkness and the stale air. The sound is mesmerizing, a counterpoint to the chains and the cold. It is a sound of defiance, not against the jailer, but against the power of despair. The other prisoners, hardened criminals and common thieves, lie in silent astonishment, listening to the impossible joy emanating from the deepest, darkest pit of the prison. You feel the presence of God not in a dramatic flash, but in the sustained, gentle vibration of your own vocal cords. The song becomes a physical act of faith, a spiritual energy that opposes the suffocating cold of the stone. Then, without warning, the profound silence of the night is shattered. The ground begins to tremble, a deep, resonant rumble that grows quickly into a violent, deafening roar. The sudden, violent shaking of the earthquake is absolute. The stone walls groan, and dust and mortar rain down from the ceiling. The floor heaves and bucks, throwing the jailer from his sleep. You hear the sharp crack of breaking wood and the immense crashing sound of the prison doors being wrenched from their stone settings. The stocks break apart under the geological force. You are thrown against the wall, utterly disoriented in the disorientation of the darkness and the dust. Your head spins, and the cold stone is everywhere. The metallic sound of the clanking chains gives way to the terrifying sound of stone tearing from stone. The physical action of the earthquake has done what no human hand could. It has broken them out of confinement. The way out is now open, setting the stage for the next dramatic confrontation with the confused, terrified jailer and the beginning of the next leg of the journey. The journey from Philippi is swift, moving south through Thessalonica and Berea, where the inevitable opposition forces you to move on quickly, leaving Silas and Timothy behind. You take the sea route alone to Athens, the cultural and philosophical heart of the Greek world. The atmosphere here is entirely different from the rough and tumble commerce of Macedonia or the legalistic rigor of Rome's colonies. Athens is a city of pure thought, preserved in its own elegant past, smelling faintly of marble dust, dry olive groves, and intellectual pride. Your first days are spent observing the city, walking through the agora, the vast central marketplace that doubles as an open-air lecture hall. This space is not defined by the crude commerce of fish or grain, but by the trade of ideas. The ground is worn smooth by centuries of sandals belonging to thinkers, poets, and rhetoricians. The statues are everywhere, too numerous to count, each a silent monument to a god, a hero, or an abstract concept like fortune. You feel a deep agitation at the sight of so much beauty, dedicated to so much futility. The chatter of the market philosophers is a constant, irritating hum. You hear the sharp, cynical observations of the Stoics, their voices measured and dispassionate as they discuss duty and fate. You hear the light, pleasant murmurs of the Epicureans, who talk about the avoidance of pain and the pursuit of tranquility, often punctuated by their gentle, knowing laughter. They debate everywhere, at the foot of the temples, under the colonnades, and at the central fountains. They engage in a sophisticated, intellectual sparring match, a game played for the sake of argument itself, without any intention of finding a final truth. You watch their easy, graceful gestures, the way they use their hands to frame their sophisticated Greek phrases. Unable to remain silent, you begin to reason with them, first in the synagogue, and then daily in the agora. You feel the thrill of intellectual combat, the necessity of crafting your profound spiritual truth into their familiar philosophical language. You are constantly interrupted, questioned, and categorized. They call you a babbler, a seed picker, dismissing your message as a collection of second-hand ideas. This leads to the invitation, not a hostile arrest, but an invitation to speak before the city's intellectual governing body at the Areopagus, or Mars Hill. The ascent to the rocky hill of the Areopagus is a short, deliberate climb up an uneven, exposed path. The rock itself is ancient, worn smooth, and deeply fissured, standing as the highest point of legal and cultural judgment. The climb forces a pause, a moment to gather your thoughts before addressing the most skeptical audience of your life. When you reach the summit, the view is spectacular. You look down over the entire city, taking in the Acropolis, the Parthenon, and the sprawling complexity of the city. The air here is pure and elevated, the cool, open air, where Paul addresses the intellectual elite. It is quieter than the marketplace. The noise of the city is a distant, muffled echo. You stand in the quiet circle of the judges, the faces of the philosophers turned up toward you, their expressions a mixture of curiosity, condescension, and detached amusement. You feel the vast difference between their world and yours. Their search is for the new thing, an endless intellectual novelty. Your search is for the ultimate, eternal foundation. You start with their own observation, their altar dedicated to the unknown God, using the architecture of their own fear and ignorance as your entry point. You choose your words with meticulous care, building a bridge from their poets and their sculptures to the single creative reality of the transcendent Lord. You describe a God who needs nothing, who is not confined by stone or gold, and who has appointed a man to judge the world, offering assurance of this by his resurrection from the dead. The reaction is a mixture of polite dismissal and genuine interest. Some laugh openly at the mention of the resurrection, an idea too primitive, too physical for their abstract sensibilities. Others, however, ask to hear more. The debate remains academic, abstract, and unresolved for most. The great city of philosophy gives way to debate, but not to widespread conversion. The experience leaves you with a certain weariness, the deep fatigue of fighting against the current of human pride and self-sufficiency. You realize that intellectual argument alone cannot pierce the shell of sophisticated skepticism. The time for abstract debate is over. The slow, gentle departure from Athens is quiet. You leave Silas and Timothy to follow later. You walk down from the Areopagus, through the Agora, past the silent statues. You are not forced out by a mob, but simply choose to move on, leaving behind the abstract debates. You head southwest, toward the narrow, heavily traveled land bridge. The goal is the port city on the other side, setting the stage for the commercial, high-stakes atmosphere of Corinth, a city defined not by thought, but by money, power, and practical existence. The journey from Athens is short but defining, leading across the narrow isthmus to the sprawling, vibrant city of Corinth. Corinth is the antithesis of Athens. It is not a city of marble and poetry, but a city of brass and commerce. Its atmosphere is charged with a raw, restless energy, built entirely on trade and transportation. The strategic location, controlling the thin strip of land between the Aegean and Adriatic seas, makes it the wealthiest city in Greece and perhaps the most morally complex. The city is a non-stop assault on the senses, dominated by the loud, constant noise of the two ports, Lycaon on the west and Centriae on the east. The noise is a high-pitched, abrasive combination. The constant, sharp grinding of stones as massive merchant ships are dragged across the isthmus on wooden rollers. The endless shouts of dock workers in dozens of different languages. The loud, rhythmic clatter of cargo being dropped and restacked, and the high-pitched screech of block and tackle. This is the sound of wealth being generated, loud, demanding, and utterly relentless. The air here is thick with a complex blend of international trade. You inhale the rich, heavy smell of imported spices, cinnamon, pepper, and frankincense, that mingle with the salt tang of the sea and the sweet, cloying odor of cheap local wine. The constant presence of people, animals, and open commerce creates a robust, earthy musk that clings to everything. You seek out the Jewish community, not just for fellowship, but for a means of self-support. You quickly find Aquila and Priscilla, a couple recently arrived from Rome due to Claudius's edict against the Jews. They share your trade, offering immediate fellowship and work. The next 18 months are spent in their workshop, dedicated to the meticulous, rhythmic work of Aquila and Priscilla's tent making. The work is precise and demanding. You sit on the ground, surrounded by rolls of tough goat hair cloth, or silicium, the very material from your home in Tarsus. The sound of your work is a soothing, steady hiss of the heavy linen thread being pulled through the thick material. followed by the dull thud of the mallet driving the copper awl. Your fingers, already calloused from years of this work, move with automatic skill. This physical labor is a profound spiritual discipline, anchoring you in the present and giving you the right to speak without financial burden. The shared rhythm of the work, the synchronized thud and hiss, builds an unbreakable bond with Aquila and Priscilla, a quiet, nonverbal foundation of trust. The specific architecture of the marketplace in Corinth is designed for maximum efficiency. The central agora is a vast, open space leading directly toward the ascent to the Acrocorinth, the towering rock formation that dominates the skyline. This marketplace is where you preach. After the synagogue, opposition forces you out. You stand amid the stalls, selling bronze wares, pottery, and imported goods, speaking the simple truth to people who worship money and pleasure. The contrast between the severe simplicity of your message and the opulent, complex desires of your audience is always jarring. The opposition here is fierce, led by the local Jewish community. They drag you before the Roman proconsul Gallio, accusing you of violating Roman law. The court is formal and frightening, but Gallio, sitting on his elevated bema, judgment seat, is a pragmatic Roman official. He rejects the case as an internal Jewish dispute, washing his hands of the religious details. You hear the sharp, final thwack of his gavel, a noise that signifies your legal protection under Roman law. The very structure of the empire, which had imprisoned you in Philippi, now acts as your shield in Corinth. You stay for many months after this event, strengthening the diverse, fractious church composed of rich and poor, slave and free, Greek and Jew. The time is defined by intense, focused teaching. The long sojourn finally concludes. You prepare for the long journey back to Ephesus and then Jerusalem. The final act in Greece takes place not in Corinth proper, but in its eastern port. The decision to cut his hair in Centrae is a visible public declaration of a vow fulfilled, a brief period of ritual purification after the intensity of the long mission. The feeling of the cold, clean scissors against your scalp is a sharp, brief sensory punctuation mark. You board a ship at Centrae, and the harbor noises, the clatter, the shouts, the smells, fade as the ship moves out into the Aegean. The long, quiet sea journey back to Ephesus begins, a period of reflective silence after the chaos of Corinth, signaling the end of the second journey's most active phase and carrying you toward the next massive center of ministry in Asia. Ephesus is a city of staggering proportions, the undisputed capital of Roman Asia. It is immense, rich, and profoundly devoted to its patron goddess, Artemis. The sight that dominates the city is the colossal, overwhelming scale of the Temple of Artemis, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. You stand before it, dwarfed by its marble columns, each one thicker than a tree trunk. The sheer expense and labor poured into this structure are a testament to the depth of local religious zeal. The temple complex smells heavily of cedar, expensive offerings, and the continuous thick haze of burning incense that drifts from the inner sanctuary, a constant atmospheric presence throughout the eastern half of the city. Your ministry here is the longest and most intensive of your career. You spend 2 full years in the lecture hall of Tyrannus, teaching and debating daily. The gospel penetrates the city deeply, cutting into the heart of the local economy and the surrounding superstitious practices. The sound of your voice, clear and precise in the Greek, becomes a fixture of the city's intellectual life. The turning point comes when the gospel threatens the livelihoods of those dedicated to the cult of Artemis. This includes Demetrius the silversmith, whose thriving business relies on crafting miniature silver shrines of the goddess. You watch the silversmiths at work in the agora stalls. The sound of their trade is a steady, tiny clink, clink, clink. The delicate hammering of metal against small anvils, shaping the intricate metalwork of the goddess's image. This is a quiet, subtle craft, but it represents enormous wealth and widespread religious fervor. Demetrius, seeing his sales plummet and his entire trade threatened by a single man's words, decides to act. He incites his fellow craftsmen, leveraging the powerful sentiment of local tradition and civic pride. The result is a spontaneous, explosive riot. The mob forms quickly, a howling, chaotic force that sweeps through the streets, grabbing 2 of your companions. The noise shifts from the measured clatter of commerce to a terrifying, primal roar. The city's inhabitants stream into the massive theater, a structure designed to hold 25,000 people. You are prevented from entering by your local friends and the city officials, who fear for your life. Inside the theater, the sounds of the mob are overwhelming and deafening. It is not an argument, it is a sonic weapon. For 2 solid hours, the crowd chants a single, repetitive slogan: "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." The sound is a vast, terrifying vibration that echoes off the stone seats and walls, shaking the very air. You stand outside, feeling the deep physical resonance of the sound through the soles of your feet and into your chest. It is a noise of religious ecstasy and irrational hatred, a demonstration of the sheer power of local tradition mobilized against a single revolutionary idea. The confusion is immense. The Roman and Greek authorities are unable to control the frenzy. They finally prevail only through the calm, reasoned intervention of the city clerk, who appeals to the citizens' civic sense and the danger of Roman intervention. The clerk's voice, though amplified by the theater's acoustics, is a thin, reedy sound compared to the mob's roar. Yet his legal logic slowly pierces the hysteria. The riot slowly dissipates. The massive doors of the theater close, and the crowd dissolves back into the marketplace, leaving behind a residue of fear, spent energy, and debris. The violence was directed at the idea of change, not necessarily at the men. The tension of the riot forces Paul to leave. His work in Ephesus is done. Staying longer would only invite another, more organized attempt on his life. The farewells are brief and full of quiet urgency. You say goodbye to Aquila and Priscilla, the friends whose steady rhythm of tent-making provided your anchor in this wild city. You leave the city gates quickly, turning your back on the temple and the theater. The chapter ends with the quiet, firm sound of his footsteps on the road, moving north toward the coast. There is no boat waiting. The journey is overland again, heading north for a final tour of Macedonia and Achaia, a deliberate path to revisit the established churches before the final fateful journey back to Jerusalem. The final return to Jerusalem is fraught with a specific, creeping tension that sets this journey apart from all the previous tours. It is defined not by external hardship, but by the pervasive internal threat of assassination. The decision to travel through Macedonia and then sail was initially set, but the danger compels a sudden, last-minute pivot. The problem is the growing hatred from the Jewish leadership who view you as the ultimate heretic. Word reaches you of a definite plot against your life, a planned ambush along the sea route, specifically timed for your expected departure. The air around you, even in the safe company of your companions, is thick with suspicion. This forces a major change in travel plans. The simplicity of sailing directly to Syria is abandoned. Instead, you quickly backtrack overland through Macedonia, accompanied by a small, diverse group of trusted delegates who hold the collection money for the Jerusalem church. The journey is now a quiet, cautious operation, a deliberate move to deceive your enemies. The logistics of securing a new, less obvious passage fall to your companions. You eventually find passage on a common merchant vessel sailing from the port of Troas. This is not a fast imperial cruiser or a military transport, but a large, heavily laden grain ship or a coastal freighter, sturdy and slow, designed to hug the coastlines. You board along with sacks of grain, casks of wine, and dozens of other ordinary travelers and merchants. Life aboard the vessel is dull, monotonous, and extremely focused. The scent of the ship is a blend of salt, pitch, and the pervasive, dry smell of the heavy grain cargo stored below deck. The sound is the constant, deep-seated groan of the wooden hull as it strains against the waves, and the creak of the massive rudder. The most profound feeling during this long coastal journey is the feeling of being a constant target. Every new face that boards the ship, every stranger who sits near you on the deck, is viewed with suspicion. You sit quietly, watching the horizon, your hands often resting on the small bundle of scrolls you carry. You speak only in quiet tones, aware that any loud pronouncement or public identification could bring the plot to fruition. The journey is a masterclass in vigilance and restraint. The pace is agonizingly slow, moving from port to port, Assos, Mytilene, Samos, Miletus. At Miletus, you make the difficult decision to bypass Ephesus completely, fearing that a visit would only invite an immediate riot and consume valuable time. Instead, you send for the Ephesian elders, meeting them on the shore. You stand on the sandy beach, the waves providing a soft washing sound behind you, and deliver a tearful, final farewell address. You look at their faces, knowing this is the last time you will see them, a painful, certain premonition. The final leg is the open sea journey toward Tyre. As the ship leaves the Greek islands behind and heads south toward the Judean coast, the sense of inevitable confrontation hardens into resolve. You know, through the repeated warnings of prophets along the way, that chains and imprisonment await you in Jerusalem. The anxiety about the conspiracy, the fear of the hidden blade, or the sudden push overboard is now replaced by a deep, unsettling certainty of a different kind of confinement. The merchant vessel finally reaches Caesarea. You disembark, the solid ground beneath your feet a final, firm resting place before the climax. Within days, you arrive in Jerusalem. The city is bustling with the crowds for Pentecost. You enter the temple complex, undertaking the required purification rituals. The conspiracy finally manifests, not in a quiet assassination, but in a sudden, orchestrated public riot. You are recognized by Jews from Asia, who falsely accuse you of defiling the temple by bringing a Gentile into the inner court. The shout goes up, a piercing, hysterical cry of, "Men of Israel, help!" The massive, chaotic sound of the mob descends upon you instantly. You are dragged out of the sanctuary, beaten and almost killed. The chaos is immediately, violently interrupted. The anxiety of the conspiracy is replaced by the sudden, overwhelming authority of the Roman soldier. The sound is the sharp, organized thud, thud, thud of Roman cohorts running down the stone steps of the barracks that overlook the temple courtyard. The tribune, Claudius Lysias, hearing the uproar, sends centurions and soldiers to quell the riot. A massive, heavily armed Roman hand grabs you, yanking you up the stone steps in chains, away from the bloodthirsty mob. This is the ultimate, violent intervention that saves your life, beginning his phase of captivity and shifting the story from the open road to the closed confines of Roman interrogation rooms and barracks. The violent confrontation in the temple courtyard ends not with freedom, but with a chain. The Roman tribune, Claudius Lysias, quickly realizes the complexity of the prisoner he holds, and fearing another ambush, orchestrates a nighttime transfer under heavy escort. The journey from Jerusalem to Caesarea Maritima, the Roman provincial capital, is swift and guarded, a blurring rush of motion through the dark hills. Caesarea is a city built by Herod the Great to honor Augustus, a deliberate statement of Roman power and modernity on the Judean coast. The governor's residence, the Roman tribunal, is a structure of imposing marble, designed to impress and intimidate. You are led into the praetorium, the official headquarters. The first sensory relief, after the heat and filth of Jerusalem's barracks and the temple mob, is the air itself. It is cool and dry, a quality achieved by the cool, clean lines of the Roman masonry and the strategic placement of sea-facing colonnades. The stone walls feel polished and smooth to the touch, a contrast to the rough temple stone. The waiting begins, the transition from crisis to bureaucracy. You are held in Herod's praetorium, likely in a secure room with a view of the sea, a psychological torment for a man who longs to travel. Days pass in this measured Roman silence, broken only by the rhythmic tramp of the centurion's patrols and the distant crash of the Mediterranean waves. The first formal proceeding is a trial before Governor Felix. The atmosphere of the Roman tribunal is one of cold, formal procedure. The air is still, charged with expectation. The governor sits elevated on his bema, and the room is dominated by the sound of your accusers. You watch the entrance of Tertullus, the professional orator hired by the Jewish high priest. Tertullus begins his speech. The sound of his polished Latin is smooth, flowing, and insidious. It is a performance delivered with rhetorical flourish, crafted to appeal directly to the pragmatic Roman mind. He begins with false flattery for Felix, praising his administration, and then delivers the accusation. You are a pestilent fellow, a disturber of the peace, and a leader of a dangerous cult. His voice is trained to project authority and legal certainty, making the charges sound like self-evident facts. You observe the way he emphasizes the Latin words for sedition and profanation, knowing that these are the only concepts the Roman governor truly cares about. When it is your turn to speak, you discard the rhetorical drama. You speak directly, clearly, in Greek, appealing to logic and the facts. You admit to nothing but worshiping the God of your fathers and clinging to the hope of the resurrection, a claim that is orthodox within the Jewish faith, but bewildering to the Romans. The trial achieves no immediate resolution. Felix, clearly hoping for a bribe, and perhaps intrigued by the concept of the way, adjourns the proceedings. The next 2 years are spent in this agonizing stasis. This is the slow, frustrating nature of imperial bureaucracy. Justice is not swift. It is a commodity to be bought, sold, or delayed. You endure the rotation of guards, the endless waiting, the meetings with Felix and his wife Drusilla, who is curious but ultimately unmoved. The routine is oppressive. You spend your days reading, writing, and receiving the occasional visitor, listening to the monotonous sounds of the garrison life outside your window, the clang of armor, the shouts of drill practice, the muffled laughter of the soldiers. Every morning brings the fresh disappointment that the long-promised release has not come. The chains on your wrists become a familiar, dull weight, a constant physical reminder of your stalled mission. When Governor Festus finally replaces Felix, the pace accelerates. Festus, keen to make a good impression on the local elite, immediately reopens your case. The scene is repeated. The same accusers, the same charges, the same legal limbo. Festus attempts to force the issue, suggesting you return to Jerusalem for trial, a proposal you know is a death sentence. In that moment, standing before the Roman seat of judgment, you invoke the ultimate legal recourse. The words are crisp and clear in the Latin, Appello Caesarem, I appeal to Caesar. Festus consults with his counsel. The short, sharp deliberation is conducted in low tones, punctuated by the rustle of official robes. The answer is definitive. To Caesar you have appealed. To Caesar you will go. The decision to appeal to Caesar is a momentous turning point. It is a decision that trades the provincial injustice of Judea for the massive, indifferent complexity of the imperial capital. The prospect is terrifying, yet strangely liberating. You know the perils of the voyage, the uncertainty of the eventual trial, but the door that was shut by the governor is now thrown open by the privilege of your citizenship. The long wait in Caesarea is finally over. The preparations begin immediately for the long, arduous journey, bringing the narrative to its most perilous phase, the sea journey to Rome. The final voyage begins not with enthusiasm, but with the clank of chains and the presence of Julius, a centurion of the Augustan cohort, who is tasked with your delivery. You are loaded onto a coastal ship at Caesarea, along with other prisoners and your loyal companions, including the physician Luke. The early stages of the journey are unremarkable, characterized by the familiar rhythm of the sea. The logistical problems begin almost immediately as you transfer to a larger Adramyttian grain ship bound for the coast of Asia. The captain is intent on making haste. As the ship makes its slow way westward toward Crete, the sailing season begins to turn. It is October, the dangerous time when the Mediterranean becomes treacherous. The logistical error of continuing the journey late in the season, is not yours, but the stubborn captain's, whose eye is fixed on profit and schedule rather than safety. The ship puts in at the small, sheltered harbor of Fair Havens on the southern coast of Crete. The port itself is modest, tucked into a curve of the rocky coastline, smelling of dried salt and juniper. You step onto the stone quay, feeling the first real chill of the coming winter. The feel of the cold November wind is biting, carrying a sharp edge that contrasts with the gentle warmth of the eastern Mediterranean you are leaving behind. You watch the clouds moving faster and lower over the Cretan mountains. You gather the ship's master and the centurion, pleading with them to remain in the harbor until spring. You speak as a man who has sailed these seas countless times, a man who knows the temperament of the storms. You warn them that proceeding will bring not only loss of cargo, but loss of life. The stubbornness of the ship's owner is palpable. He scoffs at your advice. He is a man of business, not prophecy, and he listens instead to the pilot and the ship's captain, men whose decisions are dictated by the calendar and the profit margin. They argue that Fair Havens is exposed and uncomfortable for wintering. They know of a better port, Phoenix, further west along the coast. The centurion, wary of delaying his assignment, casts his lot with the men of the sea. The small, temporary sense of security in the small port of Fair Havens, Crete, is broken by this rash decision. You watch the crew prepare the rigging, their movements quick and certain, their faces showing the confidence of professionals, a confidence you know is misplaced. The last hours in the harbor are marked by the sounds of final preparations, the creak of the anchor being raised, the loud shouts of the centurion ordering the prisoners back aboard, and the slapping of the waves against the hull. The ship pushes out into the open water. For a brief, deceptive period, the conditions are perfect. A soft, southerly breeze, a gentle wind, whispers across the water. The sails catch the air, and the ship glides smoothly away from the safety of the bay. The centurion and the captain exchange satisfied looks, believing they have proved your advice foolish. But the moment of calm is fleeting. As you round the coastal promontory, heading west, you look north toward the open sea. You feel a subtle, ominous shift in the atmosphere. The sun, which had been bright, begins to diffuse, its light turning a strange, metallic gray. The gentle southerly breeze, which had been so helpful, dies abruptly. Then from the north, a far more powerful force begins to gather. The immediate change in the weather is terrifying in its swiftness. The subtle, ominous shift in the wind and the horizon occurs over a matter of minutes. The sea turns from blue to a dark, angry slate color. The horizon becomes bruised and compressed. You hear a low, distant roar, not of thunder, but of massive wind rushing over the landmass. A ferocious northeasterly wind, known locally as the Euroclydon, bursts out from the mountainous coast of Crete. The ship is instantly caught, its large sails becoming liabilities. The captain shouts orders, his voice now desperate and hoarse. The crew scrambles, struggling to bring the sails down before the wind tears the mast from the deck. The smooth, calm rhythm of the journey is violently replaced by the sharp, terrifying sound of snapping ropes and the frantic cries of the sailors. The true peril has begun. The storm hits with a force that defies description. It is the core event of the story. 14 days of constant, relentless struggle against a massive northeasterly gale. The ship, once a stately vessel, is now a toy tossed about in a churning, dark wilderness. The immediate sound is the deep, sickening groaning of the main mast. It is a sound of raw wood under impossible stress, a prolonged, high-pitched screech that sounds exactly like a living thing in agony. The sound is almost continuous, joined by the terrifying roar of the wind, which is so loud it makes conversation impossible. Water is everywhere, not just waves breaking over the bow, but an endless, heavy feel of the freezing spray whipping across the deck. It is salty, cold, and blinding, making it impossible to see or breathe properly. The captain and the crew fight desperately. Their first act is to secure the small lifeboat, which is nearly swamped, and then to pass cables underneath the hull of the main ship, a terrifying process known as frapping, to keep the ship's timbers from separating entirely. The centurion and the prisoners are useless except as ballast, clinging to whatever they can find. The storm forces a series of desperate, heartbreaking decisions. The first day, they throw out the heavy gear. Then comes the terror of having the cargo and equipment jettisoned. You watch as the crew, their faces grim and defeated, throw the heavy grain sacks, the casks of water, and the excess tackle over the side. Each splash is a piece of the ship's survival, and a piece of your chance for justice, gone forever. Later, they jettison the ship's very furniture and spare rigging, stripping the vessel down to a bare shell in a futile attempt to lighten the load. After days of this relentless pounding, the light fades entirely. The sun is obscured by the permanent, thick cloud cover. The 14 days of constant, relentless motion and darkness become a blur of fear and exhaustion. No one can eat. The motion is too violent. The scent of the sea, the grain, and the fierce sweat of the men blends into a terrible, metallic stink. The only sounds are the storm's continuous shriek and the deep, watery thump of the waves battering the hull. You rise in the midst of this darkness, speaking not as a prisoner, but as a man of certainty. You have endured the same terror, the same hunger, but you have the assurance of a vision. Though the ship will be lost, no life will be. You urge them to eat, an act of faith against the certainty of death. The shared, meager meal, eaten in the pitching, dark hold, is a moment of impossible communion. On the 14th night, after 2 weeks of total darkness, a subtle change occurs. You are standing with the others, exhausted, when you feel the ship's motion change. The pitching is still violent, but you detect a new, low sound beneath the roar of the wind. The sailors, experts in the sound of the sea, notice it too. It is the subtle, unmistakable sound of waves breaking near land. It is not the roar of the open sea, but the characteristic hiss and crash of water hitting a shallow shore or reef. They instantly take soundings, dropping weighted lines into the water. The panicked shouts of the men reporting the rapidly decreasing depth. 20 fathoms, then 15, signal imminent impact. They immediately drop 4 anchors from the stern, hoping to hold the ship until daylight. The night that follows is agonizingly slow. The men try to escape in the lifeboat, But you intervene, assuring the centurion that if the sailors do not remain, no one will survive. The ship holds, creaking and groaning in the relentless wind. As dawn finally breaks, a gray, miserable light reveals land. It is an unfamiliar shore, a rocky beach bordered by a bay. The men immediately hoist the foresail, cutting the anchor cables and loosening the rudder ropes, making one final, desperate maneuver to run the ship aground safely. The moment of impact is chaos. The vessel is driven onto a mudflat or a sandbar. The bow wedges fast, but the stern, exposed to the full violence of the waves, begins to break apart under the strain. The sudden, grinding noise of the keel on a sandbar is the final, shattering sound of the vessel's life. The centurion orders all men who can swim to jump and make for the land. The remaining men, including you, grab pieces of wood and debris and plunge into the freezing chaos of the waves, moving from the dark prison of the sea to the blinding, physical struggle for the shore. The immediate transition from the lethal cold of the sea to the unexpected warmth of human kindness defines the first hours on the island. You scramble ashore, half drowned, onto the rugged coast of Malta, a place you recognize as Malit. The sound of your teeth chattering is loud, a frantic, involuntary rhythm that only begins to subside when the sight of the local population, the islanders, waiting on the shore, signals that the terrifying ordeal of the shipwreck is truly over. The kindness of the people is immediate and practical. They move with an earnest, simple grace, quickly gathering fuel. The surprising warmth of a large communal fire is the most profound sensory experience. You stand near the blaze, the heat radiating into your soaked tunic, feeling the agonizing sting as the warmth returns to your frozen skin. The fire crackles and hisses, its smoke mingling with the steam, rising from your clothes and casting huge, dancing shadows on the rocky ground. The islanders, speaking a language that is not Greek or Latin, but a unique Punic dialect, offer simple, practical help, wrapping your shivering body in thick, rough blankets. This is the simple, rustic kindness of the islanders, a warmth that transcends language and cultural barriers. As you stand by the fire, performing the simple, necessary task of gathering wood to keep the massive blaze going, you feel the sudden, sharp, burning sensation on your hand. A viper, likely hidden and dormant in the cold wood, strikes and clings to your flesh, drawn out by the heat of the flames. The Roman soldiers and the men around you shriek, expecting immediate death, a classic sign, in their traditional belief, of a man marked by justice, a criminal who escaped the sea only to be claimed by the land. They watch, waiting for the expected swelling and collapse. The shock of the viper bite is momentary, a sharp, brief pain. You shake the reptile off into the flames without ill effect. The islanders are stunned, quickly changing their assessment of you from marked criminal to a god, the same terrifying, short-lived worship you faced in Lystra. You quickly diffuse the situation, turning their attention away from superstition and toward the true power that protected you. You spend 3 months on Malta, forced to wait out the final stretch of winter. The time is unexpectedly fruitful. The island's chief official, Publius, shows immense hospitality, offering shelter and resources. You heal his father, who is suffering from fever and dysentery, and soon your presence is known throughout the small island. The remaining time is used for healing and ministry, You heal the island's chief official, Publius, and his household, and in return, the islanders shower you with hospitality and necessary supplies for the rest of your voyage, loading the new vessel with food, oil, and comfort items. As spring arrives, the sea is deemed safe for travel. You board a new ship, an Alexandrian grain vessel that had been wintering on the island, distinctively named the Castor and Pollux after the twin gods of seafarers. The figurehead on its bow, depicting the divine brothers, is a silent irony for the Christian prisoner, yet the ship itself is strong and capable. The final leg of the journey is underway. You pass through Syracuse in Sicily, where you stop for 3 days, then continue to Rhegium on the toe of Italy, and finally push north to Puteoli, the great port city near Naples. Puteoli is a frenzy of Roman efficiency, a massive trading hub where the sounds of the port are metallic and organizational. The clang of cranes, the rhythmic barking of official commands. Here, you are finally released from the strict security of the ship and begin the overland journey. The final walk begins here, a long, celebrated march along the ancient Appian Way. This is the oldest, most famous road in Italy, built from massive, smoothly cut stones. Its surface worn by centuries of marching armies and endless traffic. For the first time in 3 years, you walk a road knowing that the immediate threat is not an assassin or a rioting mob, but merely the long path ahead. You feel the constant, heavy pulse of the empire in the sound of the marching feet, the rattle of chariots, and the low roar of the massive, mobile population. As you approach the massive capital, the road becomes crowded with travelers, merchants, and soldiers. The tension and the anticipation rise with every step. You begin to see the familiar Roman milestones, great cylindrical pillars of stone, each marker counting down the miles to the golden center of the empire. The very air seems to change, becoming denser, drier, and smelling of brick dust and wood smoke. The moment of arrival is deeply affecting. Even before you see the gates, you feel the enormous energy of the city. You feel the final city's energy pressing in, the sheer weight of the capital of the known world, a mixture of noise, power, and overwhelming scale. The first members of the Roman Christian community, friends who have heard of your ordeal and your survival, meet you far outside the city walls. First at the dusty wayside stop of the Forum of Appius, and then another group at 3 taverns. Seeing their faces, recognizing their quiet determination, feeling their embrace of fellowship, strengthens you profoundly, erasing the memory of the storm and the viper's strike. You enter Rome not as a conqueror, but as a chained prisoner of Caesar. You are allowed, through the good graces of the centurion Julius, to live in your own rented quarters near the barracks, guarded by a single soldier. The long, arduous journey is finally complete. You are in Rome, the city you long to reach. You unroll your scrolls in your rented room, the stone of the house solid and still beneath your feet, and begin the long 2-year wait for the emperor's judgment, receiving visitors and writing the letters that will define the church for centuries. The long, painful movement is over, and the story of the open road is done. The sight of the familiar Roman milestones and the feel of the final city's energy brings the 2-hour story to a gentle, conclusive halt, allowing the listener to drift off in the quiet realization of Paul's survival.